Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the latest in the Asian Downstream Insights series. We're absolutely delighted to have you all here. For this session, we're honored to be partnering with Avantium, a pioneer in the emerging industry of renewable and sustainable chemistry. Avantium offers unique solutions addressing the global need to reduce plastic waste, tackle climate change, and transition into a circular, sustainable-based economy. Today, we're joined by Tiago Vilela, Director of Refinery Catalyst Testing. With 18 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, he has been working with Avantium for close to 5 years and is currently based in the Netherlands. Tiago will share his thoughts on how industry operators can choose the best catalyst for their operations through the careful evaluation of available options. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session with him, as well as Theo Visser, business consultant, so please ask any questions you have via the chat box at the side of your screen. Refineries change out catalysts on a periodic basis, and choosing the best catalyst is of crucial importance as it has a direct impact on the profitability of the refinery. In recent years, comparative catalyst testing in pilot plants has become the best practice for evaluating catalyst performance and profit impact. And now, without further ado, I'll hand the time over to Tiago. Over to you.
We are Avantium. We are headquartered in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Avantium is a leading technology company helping customers devise optimal high-throughput catalyst testing solutions. Through our leading-edge technology platform, Florence, we enable customers to accelerate their catalyst R&D and unveil better understanding of catalyst properties and performance. We invented the Florence technology in a way that offers unrivaled accuracy and reliability and is easy to operate and maintain. It has a wide operating window and the ability to study a variety of chemistries. Our customers benefit from accelerated catalyst R&D, improved decision-making, deeper insights, and ultimately greater competitiveness and profitability. Looking for more information? Go to our website or get in contact with us. Avantium, tomorrow's catalyst R&D today.
Welcome to this webinar. My name is Tiago Vilela and I'm responsible for refinery catalyst testing at Avantium Catalysis. Today, we are going to talk about independent catalyst testing for refineries and how to choose the best catalyst for increased profitability. Before we start, I would like to talk about the key value propositions from Avantium Catalysis. This webinar will be focused on our micropilot plant technology with 16 reactors in parallel, and now we guarantee the highest data quality. But this will not be possible without quality people. Our tests are executed by extremely qualified people with a background in catalysis and an extensive experiences in catalyst testing. We complement our testing knowledge with relevant refinery experiences. Our projects are supported by relevant subject matter experts. Last but not least, we are not linked to any chemical company or catalyst vendors. And more importantly, we adhere to the highest standards of integrity. In this webinar, we will cover the micropilot plant technology we use with 16 reactors in parallel, how we conduct refinery catalyst testing, and some guidelines and best practices. Then we will focus on the data quality and how we guarantee precision and accuracy of our test results. And finally, we will present reference projects with real case studies. And in the end, we will show also a comparison of our test results with the commercial performance for a reforming unit. Our micropilot plant technology is the most advanced in the world and has been independently validated by all the major catalyst suppliers. With this technology, we can accurately measure catalyst activity, conversion, yields, and hydrogen consumption. Multiple patents in our technology. The precision and the accuracy achieved in our 16 reactors micropilot plants result from the combination of five key patent technologies. The reactor and reactor technology that allows for an accurate isotonomous zone to ensure correct plug flow regime. The single string reactor loading, which is a special type of fixed bed reactors where the average diameter of the catalyst particles is close to the internal diameter of the reactor. And the full exudates, or beads, are stacked on top of each other. We have demonstrated the validity of this approach for hydrocracking, hydrotreating, reforming, isomerization, dewax, including stack pads, as we will see in the many test examples we are going to show today, and many other applications. Microfluid distribution guarantees a narrow gas distribution over the 16 reactors. Liquid distribution is a narrow liquid distribution with real-time measurement and control of the liquid feed over the 16 reactors. Both the inlet and outlet pressures are measured. The pressure of all reactors is equally maintained within 0.05 bar variability using our reactor pressure control technology. This is especially important for low pressure applications such as reforming. It is important to maintain the same distribution of the inlet gas and the liquid flows over all reactors. For hydrocracking and hydrotreating, an automated gas-liquid separator collects the liquid for each reactor, and the gas stream is sent to the GC for further online analysis. The liquid samples collected are analyzed offline. For reforming and isomerization, the effluent product is kept on the gas phase and fully analyzed real-time on the online GC. Obtaining this high precision with flows, temperature, and pressure allows for an outstanding reactor-to-reactor repeatability and the most accurate mass balance for all 16 reactors. This is very important in true parallel testing and ensures that all reactors are operating exactly at the same conditions. This also guarantees that the real differences measured for the catalyst are indeed true. Every test we perform, we compare the results with the vendor data, and when possible, we seek also to compare the results with the actual performance in the commercial unit. As we're going to see in some examples today, we see that the results that we produce are very consistent with the data provided by the vendors and or clients with larger reactor systems and also from commercial data. Now let's see how we conduct catalyst testing for refineries. We'll present also some guidelines and some best practices. We always test the real feedstock from the refinery, full extra dates, and at the refinery process conditions. Over the years, we have optimized and validated our test protocols with all major catalyst vendors. With 16 reactors in parallel, we can test the same catalyst multiple times, which greatly improves the data quality and the statistical significance of the results. With 16 reactors, we can also test several options in one single run under the exact same conditions. This can also be very cost efficient. We are committed to provide meaningful test results to our refinery clients to enable fact-based decisions for selecting the best catalyst with confidence. All our projects are executed by highly educated and experienced staff, supported by refinery application experts with extensive industry experience. We can simulate most refinery catalytic process, including co-processing of renewable feedstocks, from hydrotreating to hydrocracking, reforming, and isomerization. To date, we have performed more than 150 tests for refineries and catalyst vendors. In our project workflow, we always align the approach, methods, and test protocols with all stakeholders, including the catalyst vendors. The more tests we perform, the easier this process becomes. In the end, the client will always have the final word. Before starting the test, we always ensure that the test unit is calibrated and all systems are ready. This is obviously extremely important to guarantee the best data quality of the test. During the test execution, we keep a close contact with all stakeholders, and when necessary, we are flexible to adjust the test in order to maximize the quality. Very important, we will repeat the run if our pre-agreed quality criteria is not met. Regular reporting during the test execution is also very important. This will allow the client to make timely decisions on the test steering. Our reports are purposely structured for quick access to key results. In the end of the test, we provide the full data set and the complete description of the experimental design for future reference and for knowledge retention. We also offer to present the results at your facilities and the direct access to our subject matter experts when necessary. After the catalyst selection and the loading in the commercial unit, we always seek to obtain actual performance data and compare with our test results. We like to present this recommended timeline to help refineries plan independent catalyst testing. So we use as a reference the plan change out and the time required to order the catalyst. In this example, we use 9 months, but in some cases, as you know, it may be required 12 months or even longer to order the catalyst. So if we take the time that is required to order the catalyst, we always advise to do the test 3 months before this date. And then, of course, to do the test 3 months before this date is necessary that we start early, and we start early engaging with the testing labs to discuss proposals, and then also start discussing with the catalyst suppliers to have all the agreements in place to do this test. So we already have umbrella NDAs with all the catalyst vendors to facilitate this process. So for more detail and information about this recommended timeline and the process of doing independent testing, I recommend you to go and read this recent article we published in PTQ magazine in 2019 in the Q2 issue, or simply ask us for a copy. So we are not just validated by all major catalyst suppliers. So all the major catalyst suppliers are also our clients, and we do a lot of tests for them as well. So as you can see in this list, we serve a lot of the major refiners in the world, and we believe that this list will continue to grow as refineries do more and more independent testing for their catalyst selections. I would recommend you as well to go and visit our website and go to the knowledge base to see some case studies and some examples. Mentioned data quality is obviously very important to guarantee the confidence of the test results. We will now look at the key performance indicators of our data quality, and now we guarantee precision and accuracy of our test results. Here we see a sort of an X-ray of our reactors. As you can see, we load all the exudates one on top of each other. This is what we call the single string reactor loading. Tests are extremely precise. We can differentiate small differences in catalyst activity and in yields. This is very important since small increase in yields and lower gas makes can result in significant savings. As you know, one of the key performance indicators of a test quality is mass balance. Here we can see an example for an hydrocracking test where we tested 8 different catalysts and we achieved this outstanding accuracy and precision in the mass balance. Now let's look at the reactor-to-reactor repeatability. So this is when you test the same catalyst in 2 or more reactors, and then you compare the results to see if the results are close or not. As you can see here in this example, there's 4 different catalysts that we have tested in duplicate reactors. And then if you look closer into the differences in that conversion, they are essentially the same. So there's very little differences between the duplicate reactors. So these results shows how outstanding it is our precision. At the ULSD test, where we loaded 16 reactors with the same catalyst. As you can see here, simply put it, 16 reactors, they yield exactly the same sulfur when operated at the same temperature. So note the narrow standard deviation of 0.04 degrees Celsius. So the same outstanding reactor-to-reactor repeatability. Now let's look at three different test runs where the same hydrocracking catalyst is tested. Very small differences in conversion and diesel yield are obtained. The results in the different runs are essentially the same. We call this the run-to-run reproducibility. Both the repeatability of the reactors in the same run and the reproducibility between runs are obviously very important to achieve the level of precision we promise in our test results. Later on, we will look at the comparison of our test results with a commercial unit that shows, again, the outstanding accuracy of our test results. In order to demonstrate the accuracy and the scalability of our reactors, we often compare our test results with larger pilot plants. We have published various examples. In this example, for VGO hydrotreating, we compared the HTN and HTN performance with the test results obtained at Argonne pilot plant in the US. They load more than 500 milliliters of catalyst. And as you can see, we load less than 1 milliliter of catalyst in our small-scale reactors. As we can see, the results obtained in our small-scale reactor, they match very well the results obtained in the much larger reactor of Argonne. So this case study was also published in the PTQ magazine in 2020. So this is the last part of our webinar. Here we're going to show a few reference projects where we perform catalyst testing for refineries for their selection process. We're going to show some key results for hydrocracking and hydrotreating. In this test, we've compared 12 hydrocracking catalysts where 4 catalysts were loaded in duplicate reactors. The test lasted for 38 days with 3 conditions and liquid collection for fractionation. Because of confidentiality obligations, we will only show the results for 3 catalysts, A, B, and C. Once again, note the outstanding average mass balance for all the 16 reactors. Since these 3 catalysts were tested in duplicate reactors, we can also look at the precision of the results. So the net conversion is essentially the same for the duplicate reactors. We can see a clear difference in activity between the catalysts. Without surprise, the same high precision of the duplicate reactors is obtained for conversion versus temperature. Now looking at the product selectivity, we can see that despite the differences in activity, there is no real difference in the selectivity for these 3 catalysts. Once again, a very high precision of the duplicate reactors. In this next example, we evaluate 4 vendors for a mild hydrocracking catalyst selection. The pre-treat and hydrocracking systems are loaded in the same reactor and operated at the same temperature. All systems were tested in quadruplet reactors for maximum precision. The objectives of these tests were to rank the activity of the systems and the selectivity structure towards maximizing middle distillates. As we can see from the results, there are 2 systems that perform very similar. And there's also an high activity system and a high selectivity system. Looking at the selectivity versus activity, we can clearly see the difference between the different vendors, where only the 2 similar systems overlap the confidence intervals, and thus being considered similar. We can also see that the more selective catalyst requires almost 13 degrees more temperature to yield 5% more yield. Looking closer only at the 2 systems with the biggest difference in activity, the high activity versus the high selectivity systems, we can clearly see an offset in diesel yield at higher conversion levels. So we can see that the discrimination between the catalyst systems becomes stronger at higher conversions. This discrimination is most apparent on distillate fractions and naphtha fractions. Looking at the liquid product properties, we can see a consistently lower cloud point obtained with a high selectivity system. In this next example, we have tested 4 vendors in 2 separate runs for a 2-stage hydrocracking catalyst evaluation. Both the pre-treat and the hydrocracking systems were loaded in 4 different reactors. First, we tested the pre-treat systems at the same nitrogen sleep and then compared the T required to achieve that nitrogen sleep. Then we've tested each of the different vendors at the prescribed target nitrogen sleep by the vendor. In the yellow boxes on the right chart, you can see the difference in T required obtained in our tests and the T required estimated by the vendor. As you can see, two vendors' estimates match quite well our test results, and two other vendors, they appear to be a bit optimistic in their T required estimation. Here we can see the results for the temperature required for the target conversion for the hydrocracking test run. Two vendor estimates are close to the test results, with the other two apparently also with a more optimistic estimate. Once again, note the outstanding reactor-to-reactor repeatability. As we can see here, there's an extremely narrow conversion standard deviation between the four reactors loaded with the same catalyst system. Here we can see the accurate trend of the diesel yield with the conversion increase. As you can see, vendor 3 have proposed a system that performs significantly below the other vendors. Here an overview of the yield structure for the target conversion. In this last hydroprocessing test example, we have compared 4 ultra-low sulfur diesel catalysts loaded in duplicate reactors. The other reactors were used for another purpose. As we can see here in these results, 3 vendors are fairly close to each other, with catalyst D showing a significantly lower T required for reaching 10 ppm sulfur. Once again, note the precision of the duplicate reactors, which has a variability of less than 0.3 degrees. So this means that both reactors loaded with the same catalyst system yield almost the same T required to reach 10 ppm sulfur product. Here the complete sulfur and nitrogen results for all 4 catalysts at 3 different temperature conditions. Here we can see the hydrogen consumption, light ends and delta API results. In our micropilot plants, hydrogen consumption is measured real-time with an online GC. We have performed more than 90 tests with reforming and isome catalysts. Now we are going to look at a couple of reference projects for C5, C6 isomerization and reforming testing. In this example, we have compared 2 isomerization catalysts using 5 different feeds, multiple HSVs and various levels of pressure. As you can see in the reactor's loading diagram, we tested different LHSV by adjusting the volume of catalyst. Every feed was tested in separate runs with fresh catalyst loadings at various pressure levels. We have also conducted some poisoning tests. As is our standard practice, the methods applied and resultant data quality have been independently verified and accepted by UOP, Albemarle, and Naxos. So multiple temperatures applied simultaneously to provide a robust activity discrimination, and this provides a valuable information to establish spin and tin differences as well as RON and C5 plus yield. You can see here in this slide some examples of the results obtained. On the left side, you see C5 plus RON versus C5 plus yield, and on the right side, you see the effect of LHSV for low, mid, and high pressures. As already mentioned, this was a very large program that produced a lot of data for our client, and here we only show a snapshot of these results. Before we move into the reforming example, I want to explain a little bit how we perform the reforming tests. As already mentioned, we have performed more than 80 reforming tests. We have always collaborated with the major catalyst vendors to ensure the best data quality and continue to improve our methods. We are validated for reforming testing by UOP, Axens, and CNEFTIM. For reforming testing, we conduct the so-called iso-RON deactivation, where we compare the catalyst at the constant octane. The reformate product is kept in the gas phase and analyzed on the GC. RON is then calculated real-time using an analytical model that automatically adjusts the temperature of the reactors to counter catalyst deactivation. All calculated yields are based on the detailed hydrocarbon analysis of the reformate product. To compare reforming catalysts, we use our fast proprietary analytical method for the detailed analysis of the hydrocarbons. Then RON is calculated using a C5 plus RON model. In this example, GC chromatogram, which is purpley bird, Please note the amount of detail that is measured in the 35 minutes GC method. In this reforming example, we have compared 4 CCR catalysts with 2 octane targets and each catalyst loaded in duplicate reactors. See also the article published on PTQ Q4 in 2019 that explains in detail this case study. Interpolation at fixed time on stream allows a direct comparison of the effect of the higher on target on activity and yield. Interpolation at different times on stream allows a better comparison of the changes in activity and yield. If we compare catalyst A and C, we observe identical initial yields but lower activity for C. After sufficient time on stream, the difference between catalysts becomes more pronounced. The discrimination between catalyst A and C becomes even clearer as we see that the increasing loss of activity of catalyst C is accompanied by a loss of C5 plus yield. Lower temperature required, or higher activity, to reach the specific octane means greater flexibility for CCR operation. Here we perform the same comparison with aromatics composition. We can also do the same comparison for hydrogen production or for any Piona group. With each reforming test, we can also provide chloride and coke measurements immediately after the tests. We have validated our procedures with Axens and UOP. If we go back to our comparison of catalyst A and C, we see that catalyst C is overcoked compared to catalyst A. This was carried out on purpose in this case. Typically for our CCR tests, we ensure that coke content never exceeds the maximum that is typically observed at the exit of the CCR reactors, around 5 or 6%. The coke buildup probably accelerated very rapidly the base run after 130 hours, leading to the sharp drop in C5 plus yield observed. If we compare the catalyst B and D, we see that they have similar coke content at end of run conditions for both octanes. But catalyst B is much more coke resistant and shows very little decline in activity or C5 plus yield. The lower coke make will provide greater flexibility to increase the product severity and, for example, increase aromatic yield or to process more demanding feeds like thermocracked naphtha. Sometimes there can be a balance between the ability of the catalyst to achieve high yield and its ability to maintain the product severity. Such isoron tests that we perform allow the precise comparison of the yield trends and the stability trends. As I already mentioned, we seek to validate the accuracy of our technology by comparing our test results with the performance in the commercial unit. I would like to finalize this webinar with an example where we compare our test results with the performance of the same catalyst in the NASA. In the top we see the actual reactor temperature in the commercial unit. Below we see the reaction temperature in our pilot plants. For smear-regen catalysts, we perform an accelerated protocol to deactivate the catalyst within the practical duration. The deactivation strategy is chosen based on the operating conditions of the commercial unit and our experience, and this is obviously done in agreement with all the stakeholders. In order to compare commercial operation data with accelerated deactivation pilot plant results, we need to look into the actual reactor temperature data and make the comparison at similar change in weight average bed temperature. So we need to look at the operation windows with similar catalyst deactivation, approximately 25 degrees in this case. For this, we use the end of run test data between day 24 and day 26. When we compare the C5 plus yield from our test results with the performance in the commercial unit, we can see that the difference is very small. As you can see here in yellow, the data from our test is much more stable than the data from the commercial unit, but the difference observed are less than 1 weight%. When we compare the hydrogen production obtained in our test results and the performance in the commercial unit, we can see that the values are essentially the same. So there's virtually no difference between the results obtained in our pilot plant and the results in the commercial unit. So this shows how outstanding is the accuracy obtained in our tests. In this comparison, we can see that our test results are very consistent with the performance of the commercial unit for both the C5 plus yield and the hydrogen production. This is obviously a great validation of the accuracy of our pilot plant technology.
Thank you, Tiago, for sharing your insights with us. And now we're going to move on to the Q&A session with Tiago and Theo. May I invite Tiago and Theo to turn on your cameras and unmute your microphones, please. Just a gentle reminder that this session is interactive and we would love to hear what you think. So do send in your questions using the chat box feature at the side of your screen, and we'll have our panelists cover them. If there are questions that we don't get to answer by the end of this Q&A, we'll make sure that Avantium gets them after the session and we'll respond to you individually. So let's move on to our first poll. For our first poll, we look at how often you perform independent catalyst testing. So we have 4 options, ranging over never, once, sometimes, and every change out. All right, thank you all for casting your votes. So from this, we can see that the majority has said that you've never performed independent catalyst testing, which is closely followed by some who have said sometimes. And it's a bit of a tie between once and every change out. Gentlemen, what do you think of this result?
So yeah, this is not surprising. So we see that more and more refineries are performing independent catalyst testing for all the changeouts. We typically hear numbers, not just from our experience, but also from the vendors' experience, that around 25% of the refineries do independent testing. So here we see a little bit less than we would expect, but if you count sometimes and every change out, then we should be close to what is the numbers that we know. But what we know and what we've seen in the last 5 years, at least since I've took over this position, is that there is an increasing trend to test all the time.
All right, Theo, anything to add?
No, I agree. I mean, I've been working in the catalyst business for something like 35 years, and I think before the year 2000, it was very rarely that there was independent catalyst testing, and since 2000, it has been increased, the numbers, and definitely because yeah, independent testing is really an objective way of comparing catalyst systems. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the second poll, where we look at catalyst systems and options. So how many have you compared in your last change out? So again, we have options between 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 8, as well as more than 8. So while you're casting your votes, please also do feel free to send in your questions into the chat box, and we'll answer them after this poll. All right, thank you all for casting your votes. We see that there's a very strong majority in people who have compared 3 to 4 catalyst systems in their last change out. Tiago, is there anything you can say about this?
Yeah, so as you could see from the presentation, we have 16 reactors in parallel, right? So one of the things that iThroughput brought into the independent catalyst testing option is the option to test several options, right? So you're not restricted to only test a few options. In the beginning, for example, one of the first tests we did for the two-stage hydrocracking unit, we've compared only the incumbent with a new option from the same vendor and another vendor, right? So that was the options we compare. But obviously, when you have 16 reactors in parallel and the incremental costs of testing 4 options or 8 are not significant in the overall cost of the project of the test, I would say that these also have been promoting that option, and then you don't have to test. Refineries don't have to test only different vendors. They can also ask the vendors to propose different options. And then especially when you're talking about stack bed systems, there's a few variations on the stack bed systems that could bring more value to the refinery. So we always say ask the vendor several options, and I'm not surprised that most of the people test 3, 4. This is also limited by the traditional pilot plant testing that is offered to refineries, which is limited to 4. But then, of course, with iThroughput 16 reactors in parallel, then more people are testing more than 5 options and up to 8.
I see. Well, that's very informative. Before we move on to the other poll questions, we actually have a couple questions from the floor. This one is directed towards Tiago. How do you take samples between pre-treating and cracking reactors for hydrocracking applications?
Sorry again, I didn't.
Yes. So the question goes, how do you take samples between pre-treating and cracking reactors for hydrocracking applications? Yes.
Yes. So what we do is we load one reactor with the pre-treat system only, and then we sample that reactor. So that there's so if we have 2 reactors are loaded with the pre-treat system, and then the second reactor has also the hydrocracking system, and then we take the sample from the reactor. There's only the pre-treat system, and since the reactors are very repeatable, then we can verify that that the pre-treat going to the hydrocracking system is performing the same as the hydrotreating system. So basically, we load duplicates of the pre-treat system, and then we sample one of the pre-treat system.
Somebody else has asked, is this testing that you've talked about today, is it valid only for multi-lobe extrudates? And can you predict the run length also, or cumulative throughput process?
Well, so this predicting, of course, there's models that can be used. Predictions can be made. That there's always assumptions that you have to do. There's a few strategies that you can use to have a better outcome. One of the strategies to load the incumbent as well, so that you compare the results with the incumbent, and then you know how the incumbent performs in the unit, and then you have hopefully one cycle or even more than one cycle data to compare that. So if we do the tests, or if we don't have an repurpose test strategy to also measure end of run, then you normally get start of run conditions, right? And then with start of run conditions, then you can assume that if one catalyst performs so much better than the incumbent, that most likely will perform, will give that incremental cycle length or performance in the commercial unit. Then there are other alternatives which are very much disputed, and there's a lot of discussion also with the vendors. And like I said, the assumptions have to be made and the assumptions have to be respected. But we can also perform accelerated aging. And then when we perform accelerated aging of catalysts, then you can also get the end of run conditions. and then you can compare start of run and end of run. So obviously, what happens in between, it needs to be taken carefully, because you are just accelerating the aging. But then you can look into start of run and end of run. Another strategy that some customers have done is that they load a few samples of the catalyst that they want to test in their unit, and then these, of course, you have to take some considerations in if you're going to do that on the unit that the cycle length is 2 years, then it's feasible. If you're going to do that on the unit that the cycle length of 4 or 5 years, you may end up by loading samples of catalysts that after 5 years the vendors have new options. But so that's one strategy as well. You load those samples in the unit, you leave it in the unit for the cycle, and then we will test the fresh and then these spent catalysts once they are out of the unit. And there you can compare, you can really have accurate start of run and end of run condition. And like I said, what happens in between is a little bit, you don't know if the activity drops more in the beginning and then stabilize, or it drops, it's more stable in the beginning and then it drops quickly in the end. So what happens in between is a little bit difficult to measure in a short test, of course. The other challenge we have for this type of aging test or predicting cycle length and end of run is the fact that these tests are significantly longer and therefore significantly more expensive. I mean, Theo has a lot of experience in this subject, so maybe Theo can add a few things here as well.
Yeah, for sure. For refiners to make the correct catalyst choice, stability is always a key point. It's activity, selectivity, and stability. I think everyone who is involved in catalyst testing does agree that to measure stability is difficult, because you typically load very fresh catalyst and you've tested that catalyst for 10 to 30 days, and compared to a commercial performance that is still the very fresh catalyst, right? So when you do a rapid deactivation by, for example, doubling the space velocity, so you have to increase the temperature to get the same product specification. The coke lay down is really very quick compared to commercial operation. So that's a bit the issue, that when you do rapid catalyst deactivation in pilot plant testing, I would say that the figure and the deactivation figure is mostly too high. What is the benefit of having 16 reactors in parallel is that you can do a relative comparison. So you do the rapid deactivation protocol, and then you compare the catalyst system back to back on the delta, and that seems to me a rather better way of assessing the catalyst deactivation.
All right. And just adding, sorry, Theo, carry on.
No, it's fine.
All right. So just adding on to this, what about the comparison of contaminant loading?
So I assume that contaminant loading is on the feed that we are talking about. I assume that's what the participant is referring to. So we can test different feeds. So for example, one test that we've been doing often lately is to do diesel hydrotreating with several amounts of with several percentages of LCO, for example. So then we start testing without LCO to create the baseline, and then you increase the amount of LCO and see the impact of that amount of LCO in the catalyst test. If the test becomes relatively long, then in between we can run with the base feed, so we can see how much the catalyst has deactivated, so we create a baseline. So with contaminants, we can do the same. So it's not a test that we do often for either treating or either cracking. But for example, for Isome, we have done that. For example, we did some on-purpose deactivation runs where we put in contaminants for other types of applications. From petrochemical, we also do that. So we increased within certain boundaries, we increase the amount of contaminants and see the impact on the catalyst. But of course, we can do the same for either treating and either cracking. So it's basically a question of adding or dosing the contaminant into the feed. And then, of course, if you want to do this on a structural way, either you have different types of feeds that you process in the refinery, and then you do the test with those types of feeds, so then you know the impact of each of the feeds, and then each of the feeds, they have several contaminants, not just one. If you want to see the impact of one particular contaminant, then we would dose that contaminant during the test, and then you see the impact of that particular contaminant, of course.
Of course. So moving on from the audience questions for now, we'll take a break from that and we'll move into our third poll of the session. What do you consider is more important to select the independent catalyst testing lab? Is it price, the quality of the results, or the advanced pilot plant technology such as high throughput? Thank you all. So we've seen that most of you have said that it's the quality of the results that are more important than price or than the advancement of the technology that is going to be used. Theo, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I can see the results, that the quality is the most seen, is the added value of independent testing. I do understand that, because when you, as a refiner, have 3 or 4 technical proposals from catalyst vendors, the formats can be different, so you have to compare those 4 proposals to a common baseline somehow, and of course refiners will use their LP model to evaluate that performance. So the benefit of independent testing, and especially with 16 reactors, that you have a back-to-back comparison, same conditions, same operating conditions. Rule out that you have to make that comparison between four different ways of proposals. Yeah, so I can see the outcome of the poll. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for your input, Theo. So now we're going to move on to poll number 4, which looks at the references to the planned change-out date. So with reference to this, when do you normally start planning independent pilot plant testing? Excuse me. So we look at the options of more than 18 months, or 17 to 12 months, 12 to 9, and less than 9 months. right, thanks for voting. So we can see that the majority of about 36% of you feel that within about 12 to 9 months is when you start planning for independent pilot plant testing. And we actually have a tie between, more than 18 months as well as 17 to 12 months. So I guess that there isn't that much of a difference there. Tiago, what do you feel about this?
Yeah, I'm glad to see that this is the case. As I presented today, we did that there was, obviously there was a help me, help you strategy here. So that's why we wrote this article where we present also this recommended timeline. I mean, this obviously is important that refiners recognize that this is very important. So it's not just selecting a testing lab and then, okay, give us the data and then we use the data and this is like a magic ball. No, I think it's important that you start early. I think it's also important that the refinery takes responsibility for the tests. And then by using this process and by making it, by implementing this in the refinery and making it a procedure, right, then you can build on it and then you get better and better with it, and then you establish also relationships and trust relationships with the testing labs, and then you can also, by using a testing lab that you think is trustworthy and it produces good results, such as Avantium, then you can also compare results with previous tests, and then you can build on it as well. So I think it's absolutely necessary that you start early, but like everything in life, once you go through it once, twice, 3 times, then it becomes really easy. Catalyst suppliers also nowadays, they accept more and more that this is a practice that is here to stay. And then if you can't fight them, then join them. And that's also what we do in our business as well. We collaborate very well with the vendors, with all the vendors. Like I said in the presentation, they are also our customers. They give us a lot of business as well. So yes, I'm glad to see that a lot of people starts early. And then of course this is an indicative timeline. And if we're talking about reforming tests, for example, then it's, you can start later as well. Reforming tests are relatively shorter than either cracking and either treating tests. But again, you have to take always in consideration when you need to order that catalyst. And then if you already have running agreements with the vendors, then you don't need to start so early. But yes, I think it's good to start early, and it's good to keep that the objectives in line as well.
Absolutely. And Theo, is there anything that you might want to add on to this?
Yeah, it depends on the application, but there is still about 1/3 of the participants going for, what was it, up to 9 months. Especially for hydrocracking, hydrotreating, that's pretty short. I mean, you have to take into account the lead time of catalyst production and delivery, which is easily 6 months. So I guess what Tiago was saying, 1.5 years ahead, starting the process is the best thing to do to reduce stress and so on. Don't also forget that you need feed samples to be sent to Netherlands, and also that can be a tedious process. Thanks.
All right. I think it's interesting that, as Tiago says, if you can't beat them, you join them. And I think that's a very interesting way of putting it. Before we move on with the rest of our poll questions, we'll look at other questions from the floor. So please feel free to keep sending in your questions. We've got so many, and we're going to look at this one. What is the best way to accelerate the deactivation in the bench and pilot scale experiment while remaining industry relevant?
Yeah, I can start, and I think Theo already mentioned that as well. We have this question a lot. We have this discussion also a lot as well. Even internally at Avantium, there's a lot of discussions and a lot of different opinions. Like I said, assumptions have to be made. Theo also mentioned that if you are accelerating the deactivation, then there's some deactivation mechanisms that are not going to be the same as in the commercial unit. But again, a pilot plant test is a simulation of the commercial unit. So then if you're careful with the assumptions and the way you interpret the data, I would say that the best way to do the accelerating is to increase the space velocity. So then you maintain most of the conditions the same, the pressure the same, but then you increase the amount of feed, that the catalyst has to process on a given unit of time, and that gives us a way to reduce the amount of the test that you need to do. Another good strategy that we've seen, and like I said, this requires proper planning, and it's not 18 months, it's actually more than that, is that you select a few options and then you load a few canisters in your unit with those options. And then in the end of the cycle, you remove those options, and then we'll test the fresh and the spent. And like that, you already have the end of run and the start of run for both, for all the options. Again, comparing with the incumbent, that you already have a cycle, that you know how the catalyst deactivates in your unit, is always beneficial. And like Theo said, the delta, I think the delta is the key, and that's also why we put so much effort in demonstrating how repeatable and reproducible our technology is, and the reactors that are operating in the same conditions. So if you test the same catalyst twice in the same run, you get the same results. So then, yeah, those differences, the delta that you observe, that's the key as well. So have a baseline such as the incumbent, and then you see how much more, how faster or how slower a new option deactivates, should give you confidence that in the commercial unit will also deactivate slower than the incumbent.
All right. And so now we move on to the next question. So once the ranking of the group of catalysts has been established by one set of analysis for a specific process for a refinery, do you see any change in results for the same set of catalysts for other refineries?
So the results of the test are, as I think no surprise for everyone, is dependent on the type of the feed, right? So different types of feeds with the same catalyst will have different results. So that's also one of the values of doing independent testing with the real feed. And that's obviously, if you have a sets of feeds that you normally process over a cycle, then the advice will be to test all of those feeds, or all of those samples, or a representative sample of that feed. But so we see different results for the same when we have the option to test the same catalyst, and sometimes we do, and then we have different feeds, then we see a big impact. One good example, since we do a lot of tests for reforming, is that, yeah, in reforming, we often test the same catalyst because there's two vendors and there's a few options of catalyst. There's not a lot of different options, and we see a big impact on the type of feed. So some feeds can deactivate the catalyst twice as fast than other feeds.
All right. Thank you very much for answering that question, Tiago. I think Theo might be having a couple issues, but never mind. While we wait for Theo to come back, let's have a look at poll number 5. So when it comes to your pilot plant result, what level of precision do you expect from pilot plant's results mass balance? So we look at 100% with a buffer of about 4%, and we have 3%, 2%, and 1%. All right, so it's almost overwhelmingly 100% with a buffer of 3%. So nobody says, buffer 4% or anything. Tiago, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's not surprising, and I mean, there's a reason why we put this question in there. I think depending on the application, there's different levels of accuracy. We believe that we have one of the most accurate, if not the most accurate system available. I think mass balance is often seen as an absolute quality criteria, but I think there's other quality criteria that you have to look at as well. I see that plus or minus 1%. Some people tend to go to 25%. This is something that we can achieve, but I would like to note that having a mass balance of plus or minus 2%, that's what we guarantee. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a plus or minus 2% on your activity or diesel yields. So often you get with plus or minus 2%, you can get much lower confidence intervals for your activity and for your selectivity as well.
All right.
But yeah, obviously mass balance is an important factor in this case. In our systems, mass balance is actually the total error of the system. It includes the flow, the error in the flow meters, the error in the weighting, the error in the distribution of the 16 reactors, the GC error, so all the measurements. But yeah, so it's no surprise that that this goes into plus or minus 3%, plus or minus 2%, and I'm glad that people understand that this plus or minus 2 and plus or minus 3 it's as good as you can get. And of course,
right.
like I said, if we can get to plus or minus 0.5%, like we can, it's outstanding.
All right. So now we'll move on to our final poll question for the session. What difference would you accept between the activity obtained in the pilot plant and the commercial data? So we look at what less than 1 weight percent, or 1 to 2, 2 to 4, and more than 4 weight percent. As always, while you're voting, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat box at the side of your screens, and we will be asking your questions towards Tiago and Theo. All right, so thank you all for casting your votes. About 10% have said that you'll accept less than 1 weight percent, whereas it's almost a tie between 1 and 2 and 2 and 4 weight percent. So we've only got about a 10% difference there. So Tiago, Theo, what do you think of this? What are your thoughts?
Should I answer, Tiago?
Yeah, you can go first this time.
Yeah. I think 1 to 2% weight difference is quite acceptable, and in my experience, that is basically the right figure. 2 to 4% weight is a bit high. Eh? I mean, when the accuracy of the activity translate to 4% difference in yields, then when you look at the value, when you would have 4% less diesel or 4% more naphtha, that's quite a difference. So I would say that the 1 to 2% is quite a good common figure. Tiago?
Yeah, I would agree as well. So we can achieve less than 1%. And then, of course, you have to, there's a couple of things here. That's why we try to make the distinction between precision and accuracy. So precision is what you can achieve in your own system. If you compare, if you do two tests with the same catalyst, what kind of results do you obtain? And then accuracy is, of course, when you compare that data with other tests, right? With other pilot plants, with the commercial unit. And then we all know that a lot of variables in the commercial unit that we can't mimic in the pilot plant. And that's why we showed also this example for a reforming unit where the results are very much in line with the commercial unit. But we also see that the C5 plus in the reformer unit there's a 1.2% standard deviation by itself. So even the results that you get in the commercial unit can vary within the large. So I would agree with Theo that 1 to 2%, it's what it makes more sense. Above that, I also agree with Theo that then that there's a lot of money that we are talking about. So I think it should be 1 to 2%. Looking at the variability that you achieve in your own commercial unit, right? If you measure in your own commercial unit, you already have that easily 1 to 2% variability. So I think 1 to 2% is what you should aim for. And yeah, in this case, that would present that we achieve less than 1%, but that doesn't mean that that is going to be the case for all the tests. We do have a few references with commercial units. We cannot present all the references because of NDAs and pushbacks from the vendors, but we do have often confirmation that our test results are in line with the performance in the commercial unit, and more important, that the deltas observed in the test, the differences between the different options are then reflected in the commercial unit.
Okay, thank you very much for your input on this, gentlemen. So we are going to move on to more questions from the audience. We've got quite a few really good ones here. Someone says, your mass balance is already very good. However, do you also perform data reconciliation to further improve carbon and hydrogen balances?
So the results that we show on the mass balance, those are the absolute results. We don't do any reconciliation of the values. So that's what you see is what we get. But of course, if that's a request from a specific client, then we can do that as well. But the results we show are results without any reconciliation. It's mass that goes in, and then mass that we measure in the gas and in the liquid afterwards.
Okay. Okay, so someone else has also asked, what are the things that the catalyst testing can show that cannot be written in a vendor proposal, and will that or can that make or break catalyst selection?
Yeah, so one of the things that I already mentioned is, of course, that you don't get predictions based on models. You get the real data, and then with that real data, you can still use models to compare, of course, and you should use your own models to compare that. But when you test an independent lab, then first of all, you test all the catalyst options in the same pilot plant, and more importantly, with your feed, with the feed that you're going to process. And that gives you a true performance of the catalyst for a startup run for that feed. And then with catalyst options, they may have very good models, and I'm sure that they have a lot of experience, but they don't really test for that particular feed. If you ask the vendors to test, each of the vendors to test, then each of the vendors, they will use their own pilot plant. Often they will use their own protocol, and then it becomes difficult for you to compare the results from different pilot plants and often different test protocols as well. So that, in our opinion, yeah, that's the value of independent testing, is that we are independent and we test all the catalysts and the same, we compare like for like with your feed or feeds if you test more than one feed.
All right. Someone else has also asked, is the string reactor applicable for vacuum residue?
Yeah, so in terms of performance, we are pretty sure that it is applicable, that you would get good results. But then take in consideration the type of feed that we are talking about. So we have done some tests, but at this moment we would say that using this technology for this heavy feeds would be impractical. So we have small reactors, small pipes, and although we have a lot of technology and a lot of strategies to make sure that we pump heavy viscous feeds without any issues, like heavy VGO, and we even done tests with the atmospheric residue, and that works well. But then when you're talking about vacuum residue, then I would say that this technology will not be applicable, not from the point of processing the feed, not from the performance of the reactors.
All right. So someone else has also asked, may I request an elaboration on how or why feed quality will change the catalyst ranking? What are the factors that you have to consider? Because this limits the flexibility of the refinery to being open to various types of crude processing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is something that we see, and I'm sure that this is something that the vendors also will tell you. I know of examples of refineries that change so often the feeds and the feed quality that the vendors do not provide any guarantees on their catalysts whatsoever. So different qualities of feed, the different contaminants, and then this will impact the deactivation of the catalyst. So that's the reason basically behind it. And I'm sure that yeah, if you know about catalysis, you will know that different harmful or contaminants or metals or can have different impacts on the catalyst deactivation. And then yeah, if you have more difficult feeds, then they will deactivate the catalyst fast.
I see. We've also got another question coming in. The questions are coming in really fast. Someone says, you've said that Avantium is independently validated by all major catalyst vendors. What do you mean? What can you tell us about this process?
So over the years, we have, so like maybe you didn't notice from the presentation, but most of the catalyst suppliers, they also have the same technology that we use for refinery catalyst testing. They have the same technology. So Avantium provides testing services, but we also sell the equipment. So we provide this equipment. So most of the vendors, they have our equipment, well, several of our testing units. But over these years, what we did is that we went through formal qualification programs. And so we do tests with the vendors, and then we obtain their qualification because they have the results, and then they can compare the results with their own pilot plants, and in some cases even performance in the commercial units, or we went through formal qualification runs, and then that allows us to make these announcements that we are qualified by the vendors.
All right. So moving on to the next question. Someone says, have you ever performed tests with the co-feeding of vegetal oil? And could you tell us a little bit more about this process?
Yes. So we that's obviously something that is that is becoming more and more interesting for refineries. There's maybe not so many yet. So I think refineries nowadays, they do the test. So the test that we did, it was not so much to select the best catalyst. There's still not that drive in there to find the best options. Through most refineries, they don't see that there's a lot of options out there. They consider one or two vendors as being the leading vendors for these applications. But we do those tests to see the impact of feeding more or less vegetable oil. And so we recently did a test where we started with 20% vegetable oil, and then we increased that percentages up to 100%. to see what is the impact on those results. And we are trying to get permission to publish these results as well. So this will come hopefully soon. We are able to publish an article with these results, so then you can also see what is the impact of, well, I guess people know what is the impact of feeding more vegetable oil. You have much more, yeah, the increase of hydrogen consumption becomes exponential. But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to publish these results as well.
All right, we've got our fingers crossed for that. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I think we have time for one last question. So someone has asked, can you provide commentary on if you've always included the incumbent catalyst in your tests?
Yes. Well, I see another question coming in as well.
Yeah,
yes,
we do.
We do always include the incumbent, and this is also something that, yeah, we advise. But it's like we said, when we are doing comparative catalyst testing, it's extremely valuable to have the incumbent also being tested, because then you can also compare the results. It's a validation of the test results with the performance in the commercial unit, because you know how that catalyst performs, and then it gives you a baseline for that relative comparison or the relative increase in performance for the new options.
All right. So right, we still have one last question. So someone has asked this burning question. For the reformer catalyst, we have the regeneration process. So in the pilot test, how do you estimate this factor?
Yeah, so it depends on the application. So if we're talking about CCR testing, we do basically one cycle. So we don't do multiple cycles. And then, again, it's a question of cost. So we have that capability, and we have actually run some of those tests for vendors. But it's a question of cost. But what we do is, for CCR, we do a normal deactivation. So we at ISO-RON, so we keep the same, we keep a constant RON. And what we also do for CCR, and this is something that we that we actually applied for a patent now, is a new test design where we test the same catalyst at different time zone streams, and then we compare the catalyst by coke make. So we run, let's say, 4 reactors with the same catalyst, and then we operate one for so many hours, and then more hours, and then in the end we measure the coke, and then we interpolate the results for coke make. That gives you that performance correlation. For SR, like the example that I showed, we do an accelerated deactivation, and depending on the operation, the commercial unit, we either increase space velocity or we change the pressure. This is normal standard approaches that we have and that we have done many times. And then normally it's very easy to agree with the vendors. So first we propose something based in our experience, and then we seek the agreement from the vendors and the refinery as well. So we do that accelerated deactivation to make that example. But no, so for CCR and for SR, we don't do repetitions of the cycles. That will take much more time, because then also with CCR, what is representative? How many cycles do you have to run to make it representative? And SR the same. How many cycles do you have to do that as well? So we basically simulate one cycle, and then by having that increment difference between the incumbent and the new options, then hopefully you get the same performance during your cycles in the commercial unit.
All right, thank you very much for answering that question. Unfortunately, that really is all the time that we have today, and we have to come to the end of today's session. Theo had to duck out for a little while, but a huge thank you, nevertheless, to Tiago and to Theo for your time and for the very, very, very informative Q&A session. It's been a genuine pleasure getting to know your insights and opinions on this topic of catalyst testing. Thank you as well to everybody who have casted your votes and sent in your questions for today. If you have any other questions that we were unable to answer today, please write to us directly and we'll put you in touch with Avantium, who will then answer you individually. So before we go today, I'd like to take the chance to say that registrations will be opening next week for this year's Asian Downstream Summit and Asian Refining Technology Conference happening this October. ADS and ARTC 2021 will be a virtual event this year and will host pre-conference virtual workshops on the 21st of October. These are complimentary for operators, and this upcoming one is hosted by Sulzer GTC. So do register your interest at the link in the chat box, and we hope to see you there. We'll also have virtual conferences on the 26th and 27th of October, so do stay tuned for more updates. Thank you very much once again for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.